The billionaire thought he knew what happened in his kitchen. He was wrong about everything. The Vaughn house was supposed to be the safest place in Rowan's life. Cameras, staff, rules, structure. Nothing chaotic ever happened there. That's why when Alaric Vaughn walked into his kitchen and saw his son in the maid's arms, and his fiancée pointing in accusation, he didn't ask questions. He assumed he already understood the truth. What he didn't know was that the danger in his home didn't look violent. It looked calm, organized, and completely reasonable. And the moment he chose who to believe, something irreversible had already begun. Because what Alaric believed he saw in that kitchen was not where the story actually started. Before we continue, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's dive back into the story. The Vaughn estate smelled like lemon polish and something Odessa couldn't name, something bitter beneath the shine. She'd worked in enough wealthy homes to know the difference between cleanliness and concealment. Rowan sat at the breakfast table, small hands folded in his lap, staring at scrambled eggs going cold. Celeste hovered behind him, her smile tight as piano wire. "Eat, sweetheart," she cooed, pushing the plate closer. "Your father wants you strong." The boy's jaw clenched. He was 7 years old and already knew how to swallow fear instead of food. Odessa watched from the doorway, her maid's uniform starched and anonymous. She'd been hired 3 days ago, another face in the rotation of help that never seemed to stay long. The agency hadn't mentioned why. "He's being difficult again," Celeste sighed, glancing toward Odessa with practiced exhaustion. "The doctors say it's behavioral, attention-seeking." But Odessa had raised 4 siblings in Lagos before the money ran out. She knew the difference between a tantrum and terror. Rowan pushed the plate away. His hands trembled. "I'm not hungry." Alaric Vaughn entered then, briefcase in hand, already half gone to whatever boardroom consumed his mornings. He was handsome in that carved, distant way, like a statue you admired but never touched. "Rowan." His voice carried authority that didn't need volume. "We don't waste food in this house." The boy's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He learned that too. "I'll handle it," Celeste said smoothly, resting a manicured hand on Alaric's shoulder. "You have that 9 o'clock. Alaric kissed her cheek, brief, obligatory, and left without looking at his son. The door closed. The house exhaled. Celeste's smile vanished like sugar and acid. She leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper Odessa almost missed. "Eat now, or I'll tell your father you were disobedient again." Rowan's fork shook as he lifted it. Odessa turned away, her heart pounding, filing the moment into a mental ledger she'd been keeping since childhood. She'd worked for cruel employers before, but this was different. This was rehearsed. Later, when Celeste left for her salon appointment, Odessa found Rowan in the pantry. He was eating crackers straight from a box, shoving them into his mouth like a prisoner hoarding bread. He froze when he saw her. "It's okay," Odessa whispered. "I won't tell." His eyes, too old, too knowing, searched her face. Then he whispered for words that changed everything. "She puts things in my food." Some dangers were routine like a uniform. Odessa realizes food may be the battlefield, not the bedroom. Odessa spent her first week learning the architecture of deception. The Vaughn mansion had cameras in every room except the bathrooms, sleek black domes that rotated like watchful eyes. Alaric had installed them after his first wife died, back when Rowan was barely walking. Security, he'd called it. Peace of mind. Celeste performed beautifully for every single one. Odessa watched her that Thursday morning, preparing Rowan's breakfast with the precision of a pharmacist. Organic oatmeal, sliced strawberries arranged in a heart, a glass of fresh squeezed orange juice with a bendy straw because he's still my little boy. The camera captured maternal devotion in high definition. It didn't capture the way Rowan's breathing changed when Celeste turned her back, or how his fingers gripped the table edge until his knuckles went ghost white. Or the split-second pause before Celeste handed him the bowl. A pause so brief it could have been nothing, could have been everything. "Eat up, sweetheart," Celeste said, her voice honey-smooth. "We have piano lessons at 11. Rowan ate, slowly, mechanically, like a prisoner completing a task. Within 20 minutes, he was clutching his stomach. "Not again," Celeste sighed, pressing a hand to her forehead with practiced worry. She looked directly at the camera. "Alaric, if you're reviewing this later, he's been like this all week. I think we need to call Dr. Morrison again." Odessa stood in the hallway, invisible in her uniform, and wrote in the small notebook she'd started keeping. Thursday, 9:47 a.m., breakfast served. 10:09 a.m., stomach pain begins. 22 minutes. The doctors had run every test. Celiac disease, lactose intolerance, irritable bowel syndrome, anxiety disorder. The file in Alaric's study was thick with inconclusive results and mounting bills. "It's behavioral," Dr. Morrison had concluded in his last report. "Children this age often manifest emotional distress through physical symptoms. He's still processing his mother's death." Alaric had nodded, relieved to have an explanation that required no villain. But Odessa had grown up in a household where food scarcity made you observant. You learned to notice who ate what, when, and how much. You learned that hunger could be weaponized, that nourishment could be conditional. She started tracking patterns instead of events. Monday, toast with jam, 18 minutes until pain. Wednesday, chicken soup, 25 minutes until nausea. Friday, pasta with butter, 15 minutes until vomiting. Every meal Celeste prepared followed doctor's orders perfectly. Low sodium, no artificial colors, portion controlled. The woman even kept a food diary she'd show Alaric over dinner, sighing about how worried she was, how helpless she felt. What the camera showed was obedience. What it missed was fear. Odessa watched Celeste comfort Rowan through another episode, stroking his hair while he curled on the bathroom floor. To anyone reviewing the footage, she looked like a saint. But Odessa saw what the lens couldn't capture, the satisfied curl at the corner of Celeste's mouth when Rowan finally stopped crying. Odessa now knows proof may never look like proof. Odessa's mother used to say that righteousness without risk was just performance. Real faith, she'd whisper over the stove in their cramped Legos kitchen, meant getting your hands dirty in the service of something clean. Odessa thought about that the first time she lied to Celeste's face. "Ma'am, Mr. Vaughn called," she said, her accent thickening the way it did when she needed to seem less threatening. "He wants Rowan to eat breakfast with him tomorrow morning. Business meeting ran late. He says he misses their routine." Celeste's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Alaric didn't mention that to me. He said not to bother you. Something about wanting to surprise the boy." It was Tuesday. Alaric wouldn't be home until Thursday. By then, Odessa would have already fed Rowan twice, meals she prepared herself when Celeste was at Pilates, at the salon, at whatever appointment kept her occupied for exactly 90 minutes. Plain rice, boiled chicken, food so simple they couldn't hide anything. Rowan had looked at her with those two old eyes the first time she'd offered him the plate in the pantry. "Why are you helping me?" he'd whispered. "Because nobody else is watching," she'd answered. It was the truth that lived beneath every kindness she'd ever offered. The boy ate, slowly at first, waiting for the pain that had become Pavlovian. When it didn't come, something in his small body unclenched, just slightly, just enough. Within 3 days, he'd stopped flinching at mealtimes. Celeste noticed on day 4. "He seems better," she said, studying Rowan across the dinner table with the intensity of a scientist whose experiment was yielding unexpected results. "More energetic." Alaric smiled, the first genuine one Odessa had seen since she'd started working there. "See, I told you he'd grow out of it. Kids are resilient." But Celeste's eyes found Odessa in the corner, where she stood refilling water glasses with invisible efficiency. "Odessa," Celeste said, her voice silk over steel. "Have you been giving Rowan snacks between meals?" The room's temperature dropped. "Only what you've approved, ma'am. The crackers in the pantry. Sometimes fruit." Celeste's smile was a blade pressed flat against skin. "Not cutting yet, but promising to. We need to maintain a schedule. Structure is important for children with behavioral issues." That night, Odessa found a new lock on the pantry door. She stared at it for a long time, her reflection distorted in the brushed steel. She could walk away, find another job. There were plenty of houses that needed cleaning, plenty of families that would pay her under the table while she waited for her work visa to process. But Rowan's voice echoed in her memory. "She puts things in my food. Protect Rowan quietly, risk being accused. Expose Celeste, lose access completely." Odessa had grown up understanding a particular mathematics of survival. Sometimes helping meant lying. Sometimes protecting meant stealing. Sometimes love required you to become exactly what people feared: the outsider who couldn't be trusted, the help who overstepped, the woman who thought she knew better than the family she served. Her phone buzzed. A text from the agency. "Mrs. Vaughn requesting your availability extended through next month. Good work." Celeste was keeping her close, which meant Celeste was either planning something or already afraid. Saving him might require being seen as the villain. Odessa deleted the message and walked to her small room off the kitchen. She pulled out her notebook, the one she'd been filling with timestamps and observations, and added a new entry. "Lock installed. She knows I'm interfering. Next move. She'll try to isolate him completely. Or remove me. Possibly both." Then she prayed, not for courage, but for wisdom to know which rules were worth breaking. The new regime began on a Monday, announced over mimosas and fresh-baked croissants that only the adults would eat. "I've been reading," Celeste said, sliding a parenting book across the breakfast table toward Alaric. The cover promised raising resilient children in a culture of coddling. "We've been enabling Rowan's food issues instead of addressing them." Alaric glanced up from his Wall Street Journal, already half listening in that way successful men perfected. Present, but not truly there. "The book recommends independence training," Celeste continued, her voice measured and reasonable. "Age-appropriate consequences. If Rowan refuses a meal, he waits until the next scheduled mealtime. No snacks. No exceptions. It teaches self-regulation." "Sounds reasonable," Alaric said, already returning to the markets page. Odessa, clearing plates in the corner, felt her stomach drop. The rules were printed and laminated by Tuesday, hung on the refrigerator with alphabet magnets like a kindergarten classroom poster. Rowan's meal schedule: breakfast, 7 a.m. lunch, 12:30 p.m. dinner, 6 p.m. and no snacks between meals. "We are teaching discipline and healthy habits." It looked wholesome, structured, like every parenting blog Alaric would scroll past during his commute. It was torture dressed in primary colors. The first test came Wednesday morning. Celeste prepared Rowan's oatmeal with the same careful precision, the same maternal smile. Rowan stared at the bowl, his small hands clasped in his lap. "I'm not hungry," he whispered. "That's fine, sweetheart," Celeste said, her voice dripping false understanding. "But the next meal isn't until lunch. That's 5.5 hours. Are you sure?" Rowan's eyes flickered to Odessa, then away. He was learning not to look for rescue. He didn't eat. By 11, he was pale. By noon, his hands were shaking. When lunch finally came, 5.5 hours exactly, he was so hungry he ate too fast and vomited 20 minutes later. "Natural consequences," Celeste explained to Alaric that evening, showing him the meal schedule on her phone's tracking app. "The book says children need to experience the results of their choices. It's the only way they learn." Alaric nodded, distracted by an email. "You're doing great with him." "Really?" Odessa watched Rowan that night through the crack in his bedroom door. He was lying in bed, arms wrapped around his hollow stomach, too proud or too scared to cry. She'd seen this before, not in fancy houses, but in the village outside Lagos, where her grandmother lived, where food was scarce and power was everything, where adults used hunger like a leash. The harm wasn't what was done, it was what was denied. By Friday, Rowan had developed a tremor in his left hand. His lips were chapped. His eyes had that glazed distance Odessa recognized from her own childhood, the place minds went when bodies started failing. She tried once to speak to Alaric, catching him in the hallway between meetings. "Mr. Vaughn, I'm worried about Rowan's eating. He seems... Celeste's handling it." He interrupted, not unkindly. "She's read all the literature. Sometimes kids need boundaries, even when it's hard to watch." That night, Odessa found Rowan in the bathroom, trying to drink water from a faucet without making noise. He froze when he saw her, guilt and fear warring on his 7-year-old face. "The schedule says no food between meals," he whispered. "Does water count?" Something inside Odessa cracked clean through. She knelt down, her uniform crinkling. "Water never counts. Drink as much as you need." He gulped it desperately, then looked at her with eyes that carried too much understanding. "She's doing everything right, isn't she? That's why no one believes me." Odessa realizes Rowan's body is responding before anyone believes her. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of his trembling hands, then his chapped lips, then the shadows under his eyes that had appeared in less than a week. Documentation, evidence, proof that would never be enough, because neglect dressed as discipline always had plausible deniability sewn into its seams. Alaric was waiting for her in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, still wearing yesterday's suit. The circles under his eyes suggested he'd been waiting a long time. "We need to talk," he said. Not angry, just tired in that bone-deep way that comes from trying to hold together things that keep breaking. Odessa's heart hammered, but her face remained steady. She'd practiced this expression in mirrors across 3 continents, the mask of someone who had nothing to hide, because she owned nothing worth protecting. "Of course, Mr. Vaughn." He set his phone on the counter. On the screen was a screenshot of her personnel file from the agency. Red flags highlighted in yellow. Previous employer reported overstepping boundaries. Dismissed after interfering in family matters. "Celeste showed me this last night," he said quietly. "She's concerned you're developing an inappropriate attachment to Rowan, that you're undermining the structure we're trying to establish." The words were so carefully chosen, they could have been rehearsed. They probably were. "Mr. Vaughn, I would never." She also showed me the pantry lock she had to install, and mentioned you've been asking Rowan questions about his meals when she's not around. He rubbed his face. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but Celeste has been nothing but patient with my son. She's following expert recommendations. She's documented everything." As if summoned, Celeste appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a silk robe, her face arranged in sympathetic concern. "Alaric, you didn't have to do this so early," she said softly. She turned to Odessa with eyes that carried a warning wrapped in kindness. "I understand you mean well, truly, but Rowan needs consistency right now, not another person questioning the program. It confuses him." She moved to stand beside Alaric, her hand finding his shoulder in a gesture so natural it looked like love. "I know this is difficult to watch," Celeste continued. "The independence training seems harsh, but the developmental psychologist we consulted, Dr. Chun, she's published 3 books. She assured us this is evidence-based. Children with trauma backgrounds often test boundaries through food control. We're helping him feel safe by providing structure." Every word was a nail in a coffin Odessa could see being built around her credibility. "I've worked with families like yours before," Odessa tried, her accent thickening with stress. "In Lagos and London, children who stopped eating because—" "That's exactly what concerns me," Alaric interrupted, and now there was an edge to his exhaustion. "You're projecting your experiences onto my son. Rowan isn't a refugee or an abuse victim. He's a privileged child with behavioral issues and a father who travels too much. His voice cracked slightly. I'm trying to fix that. Celeste is trying to fix that. But we need staff who support our parenting, not second-guess it. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Am I being let go? Odessa asked. Celeste answered, her voice honey over glass. Of course not. We just need to establish clearer boundaries. You're wonderful at your job. The house has never looked better. Just let's handle Rowan. Can you do that? That should have ended it. It didn't. Odessa nodded because anything else would mean losing her visa, her income, her chance to send money back to her sister's children in Lagos, who depended on every wire transfer. She nodded because she was good at surviving, even when survival meant swallowing truth. I understand, she said. I apologize for overstepping. Alaric's shoulders dropped with relief. Thank you. Really. I know this isn't easy. Celeste smiled. Genuine warmth that almost looked real. Why don't you take the weekend off? Paid, of course. You've been working so hard. It was Friday. They were sending her away for 3 days. Odessa left the kitchen with her heart pounding. She passed Rowan's room on the way to pack her weekend bag. His door was cracked open, and she could see him pretending to sleep, his small body rigid under superhero sheets. He heard everything. That afternoon, she took the train to her cousin's apartment in Queens, her phone filled with photos she couldn't show anyone, a notebook full of timestamps that proved nothing. The house behind her looked peaceful in her rearview mirror, a mansion where a little boy was learning that no one would believe him, and a woman was learning that sometimes doing the right thing meant being called crazy. The next incident happens where no one expects danger. Sunday night. Her phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello. Heavy breathing. Then Rowan's voice, barely a whisper. Odessa. She gave me something. In my water. I'm scared. The line went dead. Odessa broke every traffic law getting back to the Vaughn estate at midnight. The gate code still worked. Celeste hadn't changed it yet, which meant either she'd forgotten or she wanted Odessa to come back. Neither option was comforting. The house was dark except for a light bleeding from under the kitchen door. Odessa's hands shook as she pushed it open. Rowan was sitting at the island, a glass of milk in front of him, his face pale as moonlight. Celeste stood behind him, one manicured hand resting on his shoulder like a benediction. Odessa, Celeste said, her voice silk smooth with surprise. What are you doing here? I thought you were spending the weekend away. He called me. Odessa's eyes locked on Rowan. He said you gave him something. Celeste's expression shifted, just briefly, into something cold and sharp before the maternal mask slid back into place. Rowan, sweetheart, did you call Odessa? We talked about this. You can't keep making up stories for attention. I'm not. Rowan's voice cracked. He tried to stand, and that's when Odessa saw it. The way his legs wouldn't quite hold him, the glassiness in his eyes that wasn't sleepiness. What did you give him? Odessa moved forward. A glass of milk. He was thirsty. Celeste's voice hardened. You need to leave. Now, before I call the police for trespassing. Rowan reached for the counter to steady himself. His hand knocked into a bowl of fruit. Apples scattered across the marble like dropped marbles. He stumbled, trying to catch himself, and collapsed. Odessa moved on instinct, the way her body remembered catching her youngest brother when he'd had fever seizures back home. She was on the floor in seconds, cradling Rowan's head, checking his breathing, his pulse, his pupils. Call an ambulance, she shouted. But Celeste was already screaming, loud, hysterical, perfectly timed. Get away from him. Alaric. Alaric, help. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. Alaric burst through the kitchen door in his pajamas, his hair wild, his face carved with panic. What he saw, Odessa on the floor, holding his unconscious son, Food scattered everywhere like evidence of struggle. Celeste pressed against the counter, pointing with a shaking hand, tears streaming down her face. She came back. Celeste sobbed. I told her to leave us alone, but she came back and she was trying to take him. She grabbed him and he fell. That's not what happened. Odessa's voice cracked. He called me. He was sick when I got here. She gave him something. She's been obsessed with him, Celeste continued, her voice breaking in all the right places. I didn't want to say anything because I felt sorry for her, but she's been taking pictures of him, following him, questioning everything I do. Alaric dropped to his knees beside them. His hands were gentle as he took Rowan from Odessa's arms, but his eyes were ice. Don't touch him, he said quietly. Don't move. Rowan's eyes fluttered open. He looked at his father, then at Odessa, his mouth forming words that wouldn't come. It's okay, buddy, Alaric whispered. You're safe now. Mr. Vaughn, please. You have to listen. Odessa started. I said don't move. Alaric's voice carried the weight of courtrooms and corporate takeovers. Celeste, call 911. Tell them we need police and an ambulance. The moment that looks like guilt often hides the truth. Odessa's hands were still shaking from catching Rowan's fall. She could smell whatever had been in that milk, something bitter underneath the cream, something that didn't belong. But all Alaric could see was the scene Celeste had staged. The hysterical fiancée, collapsed child, the maid who'd been warned and came back anyway. The sirens started wailing in the distance. Rowan's fingers twitched against his father's chest, reaching toward Odessa with desperate, drowsy intention. His lips moved, forming a word. But Alaric pulled him closer, protective and certain, his back turned to the truth that was slipping away with every second. What Alaric believes happened didn't start in the kitchen. It started 3 months ago, when a woman learned to make poison look like love, and when no one thought to ask why a 7-year-old boy was so afraid of dinner. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic, and the particular fear that comes from watching someone you love hooked up to machines you don't understand. Rowan was stable, dehydrated, malnourished, and with traces of diphenhydramine in his system. The doctor had called it an accidental overdose, likely from cold medicine. Celeste had cried beautifully, explaining how she must have miscalculated the dosage, how terrified she was, how grateful she was that Odessa had arrived when she did. The irony was a knife twisting in Odessa's chest. She'd been questioned by police for 2 hours, sitting in a sterile room while a detective with tired eyes asked her why she'd returned to the house after being told to stay away. Her answer, "A child called me for help," sounded exactly like what a delusional woman would say. Rowan's phone records showed no outgoing calls that night. Celeste had deleted them. Of course she had. We're not pressing charges, Alaric had told the detective, his voice heavy with something that might have been mercy or exhaustion. It was a misunderstanding. Miss Price was concerned about my son. Overly concerned, but not malicious. Odessa had been released with a warning and an escort to collect her belongings from a house. She should have left then. Should have taken her notebooks and her photos and her dignity and walked away from people who would never believe her. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. The truth is patient. It waits for those with eyes to see. So instead of leaving the city, Odessa went to the one person who might actually look at numbers instead of narratives. Dr. Sarah Chun was the developmental psychologist Celeste had name dropped, the one with 3 published books and a private practice on the Upper East Side. Her office was all cream-colored walls and degrees framed in subtle gold. I don't typically take walk-ins, Dr. Chun said, her tone professional but not unkind. I know, Odessa replied, setting her notebook on the expensive desk between them. But you consulted on the Vaughn case, the independence training protocol for Rowan Vaughn. I need you to look at this. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. I can't discuss patient information. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to look at timing. Odessa opened the notebook. Weeks of documentation spread across the pages in careful handwriting. October 3rd. Breakfast served 7:02 a.m. Symptoms 7:24 a.m. 22 minutes. October 5th. Lunch served 12:35 p.m. Symptoms 12:51 p.m. 16 minutes. October 12th. Dinner served 6 p.m. Symptoms 6:28 p.m. 28 minutes. Page after page. Every meal Celeste prepared. Every reaction Rowan had. The pattern was undeniable. Consistent onset, consistent duration, consistent outcome. Then Odessa flipped to the second section. October 15th. 8 crackers I provided. No symptoms. October 18th. 8 rice I prepared. No symptoms. October 21st. 8 fruit from sealed package. No symptoms. Dr. Chen's professional mask slipped. Her fingers traced the timeline, her eyes moving faster as she cross-referenced dates with something on her tablet. These dates, she said slowly. This is when Mrs. Vaughn reported implementing the structured feeding schedule I recommended. Yes, but this isn't what I recommended. Dr. Chen's voice had gone cold. I suggested regular meal times, with gentle redirection, not withholding food entirely. Not, she stopped, reading further. 5.5 hours between meals for a 7-year-old showing signs of stress-related food aversion? That's not therapeutic. That's punitive. The truth wasn't loud, but it was precise. Odessa pulled out her phone, showing the photos she'd taken. Rowan's trembling hands, his hollow cheeks, the progression over just 2 weeks of Celeste's independence training. She told Mr. Vaughn you approved all of this, Odessa said quietly. Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. I did not. I would never. She looked up, her professional composure cracking. Why are you showing me this? You could take this to child services. I tried. They investigated. Found nothing. The house is perfect. The food is organic. The schedule looks reasonable on paper. And I'm just the maid who got too involved. But you have documentation. Documentation that proves Rowan gets sick after eating food his stepmother prepares, and doesn't get sick when he doesn't. But I can't prove what she's putting in the food. I can't prove intention. I can only prove correlation. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at the notebook like it was a confession written in a language only she could read. Correlation, she finally said. When it's this consistent, this documented, this precise, that's not coincidence. That's causation. She closed the notebook carefully. I need to file an amended report. I need to contact the family court. This is... She stopped, her professional training warring with her moral obligation. This is medical child abuse. Munchausen by proxy, possibly, or something close to it. Using food and medicine as control mechanisms while maintaining plausible deniability. Knowing the truth doesn't undo the damage already done. Odessa felt something unclench in her chest, not relief, but the exhausted recognition of being finally believed. Will it be enough? She asked. Dr. Chen met her eyes. I don't know. Rich families have good lawyers, and that little boy has already learned not to trust that anyone will save him. Through the office window, the city sprawled below them, millions of people in millions of rooms, and in one of them, a 7-year-old boy was learning that survival meant silence. The day Celeste left, there were no police cars or dramatic confrontations. Just a town car in the driveway at dawn and luggage stacked like evidence being removed from a crime scene. Alaric had received Dr. Chen's amended report on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, his lawyers had reviewed Odessa's documentation. By Thursday, Celeste's lawyer had negotiated a quiet exit. No charges, no publicity, no scandal that would damage the Vaughn name or her own prospects. She'd signed away custody rights she'd never legally had in exchange for a settlement Alaric's team called generous. The prenuptial agreement she'd been so eager to sign suddenly became her escape route. Odessa watched from the kitchen window as Celeste paused at the car door, her designer sunglasses hiding whatever expression might have betrayed her. For just a moment, she turned back toward the house, and Odessa could have sworn she saw her smile. Not the maternal mask or the worried fiancé, just the cold satisfaction of someone who'd played the game well, even if she'd ultimately lost this round. The town car disappeared down the tree-lined drive. No one threw a party. No one called Odessa a hero. Instead, Alaric sat across from her in his study that evening, looking like a man who'd aged a decade in a week. The same room where he'd once reviewed her personnel file now held Dr. Chen's report, medical records, and Odessa's notebook, evidence of his own willful blindness laid out in chronological order. "I should thank you," he said. His voice scraped raw. "But I don't know how to thank someone for showing me I failed my son." Odessa didn't offer empty comfort. She'd learned long ago that some guilt was deserved, some shame necessary. "You believed what you wanted to believe," she said simply, "that your son was safe. That love looked like what she was showing you. That structure was the same as care." "I reviewed the footage," Alaric continued, staring at his hands. "After Dr. Chen's report, I watched every meal. Months of recordings. And you know what I saw? Exactly what I wanted to see. A woman trying her best with a difficult child. I saw patience, devotion. I saw someone who wasn't his mother trying to become one." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I didn't see that he was terrified. I didn't see that he only ate when he thought he had no choice. Rowan was upstairs, sleeping under clean sheets in a room that finally felt safe. The doctor said his recovery would take months, rebuilding trust with food, relearning that nourishment wasn't punishment, understanding that adults could be reliable. He'd asked for Odessa twice that first week. Not his father, not the new therapist, just a woman who'd fed him rice in a pantry and believed him when everyone else called him difficult. "I'm keeping you on," Alaric said. "Full-time. Whatever salary you want. Rowan needs." His voice cracked. "He needs consistency. He needs someone who actually sees him." Odessa had expected this offer. She'd spent 3 sleepless nights deciding what her answer would be. "I can't stay," she said. Alaric's head snapped up. "What? Why not? Name your price." It's not about money, Mr. Vaughn." Odessa's voice was gentle but firm. "Rowan needs to learn that safety doesn't depend on one person staying. He needs to learn that his father will protect him. Not me. You." The truth settled between them like a stone. "I'll stay through the transition," she continued. "Help you find the right therapist, the right routine. But if I become the only person he trusts, I'm just another kind of control. Another way of teaching him the world isn't safe unless someone specific is watching. Some people protect children by breaking rules no one sees." 3 months later, Odessa stood in a different kitchen in a different house, training a new family staff on meal preparation. Her visa had been approved. Her sister's children in Lagos had new school uniforms, bought with money Alaric had insisted wasn't charity, just appropriate compensation for services rendered. Her phone buzzed. A photo from Alaric. Rowan at the kitchen table, actually smiling, a plate of food in front of him that he'd helped prepare. The text below read, "He asked me to send this to you. He wants you to know he's eating." Odessa smiled, her eyes burning with tears she wouldn't shed until later, in private, the way she'd learned to carry her heartbreak. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she saved the photo in a folder on her phone labeled simply, "Proof." Not proof of abuse. That had been documented, filed, sealed in family court records that would follow Celeste wherever she went next. This was proof of something else. That children could heal. That silence could be broken. That sometimes the people history forgot. The maids, the outsiders, the ones who spoke accented English and wore uniforms that made them invisible. Sometimes those people were the ones who saw everything everyone else missed. Knowing the truth doesn't undo the damage already done, but it was a start. And starting, Odessa had learned, was sometimes the bravest thing broken people could do. She texted back, "Tell him I'm proud of him, and tell him that trust is built one meal at a time." Then she turned back to her work, teaching another staff about timing, about observation, about the quiet mathematics of care that happened in spaces no one thought to look. Because somewhere, in some pristine house with cameras in every room, another child might be learning to survive by going silent. And someone would need to notice. Someone always needed to notice,